Right now, the world is pouring over $2.7 trillion into its militaries, fueling the most intense arms race we've seen since the Cold War. But this isn't just about counting tanks or planes. While we all watch the familiar superpowers, other nations are quietly cooking up next-generation weapons that could change the face of war forever. So, who is really winning this new arms race? And what happens to all of us when the balance of power shifts in a way nobody saw coming? That $2.7 trillion global military spending figure isn't just a number on a spreadsheet. It's a symptom of a world on edge. A world where the number of wars between countries has hit its highest point since the end of World War II. This isn't some distant problem for historians to argue about. It's a clear and present danger that's reshaping alliances, redrawing maps, and pushing the world closer to a cliff we haven't seen in generations. To figure out who's winning, you first have to understand why the starting gun for this race was fired so suddenly and with such incredible force. Section 1. The Core Problem, A World on Fire. The story of this new arms race doesn't have a single cause. It's a perfect storm of three interconnected crises, each feeding the others in a dangerous loop of paranoia and rearmament. The first and most explosive was the echo of gunfire in Europe. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine shattered nearly 3 decades of peace on the continent. The shockwave was immediate. Countries that had been shrinking their militaries since the Berlin Wall fell were suddenly scrambling to rearm. In 2024, European military spending shot up, driving the global increase. Just look at Poland. Its military budget has soared to a NATO-leading 4% of its economy. Germany, which has been a reluctant military power for decades, boosted its spending by a massive 24%, making it the fourth largest spender on Earth. This wasn't just about buying more bullets, it was a deep psychological shift. The abstract idea of war became a brutal reality, kicking off an unprecedented rush to modernize and expand. While Europe was waking up to old dangers, a different kind of storm was gathering in the Pacific. The second driver of this arms race is the long-simmering rivalry between the United States and China. Beijing has been very clear about its goal: to build a world-class military by the middle of the century, one that can challenge America and achieve its goals in the region, especially when it comes to Taiwan. This isn't some far-off dream, it's happening now. China's defense budget just keeps climbing, and it's now the second largest in the world. But it's the reaction from its neighbors that really tells the story. Japan just approved its largest military spending increase since 1952, a direct response to what it sees as a growing threat. Taiwan, sitting in the dragon's shadow, keeps boosting its own defenses, knowing it's on the world's most dangerous geopolitical fault line. It's a classic security dilemma. Every new Chinese warship prompts a neighbor to buy a new missile defense system, which Beijing then sees as a provocation, justifying even more military growth. It's a vicious cycle that is incredibly hard to break. The third factor pouring fuel on the fire is the forever volatile Middle East. The region is a tinderbox of connected conflicts, from the devastating war in Gaza to clashes with Hezbollah in Lebanon and Iranian-backed activity across Syria and Iraq. The result? A regional surge in military spending. Israel's spending jumped by a staggering 65% in a single year, showing the immense cost of fighting on multiple fronts. Iran keeps developing its ballistic missiles, trading long-range strikes with Israel and clashing with U.S. forces, which keeps the whole region on a knife's edge. Unlike the more structured U.S.-China competition, the Middle East is a chaotic web of governments and armed groups, which makes the risk of a miscalculation and rapid escalation dangerously high. These three arenas, Europe, the Asia-Pacific, and the Middle East, aren't happening in a vacuum. They're linked. A crisis in one part of the world forces leaders in another to completely change their plans. This global insecurity, where a conflict in one corner of the globe raises the threat level everywhere else, is the engine of the $2.7 trillion arms race. It's why over 100 countries increased their military spending at the same time, creating the steepest global rise since the Cold War ended. Section 2. The Case Study, The Secret Arsenals. So when we ask who's winning, the obvious answer seems to be the United States, since it outspends the next several countries combined. But spending is a crude way to keep score. The real, more secretive race is happening in technology and strategy, and that's where the picture gets a lot more complicated. While the world's eyes are on Washington, other powers are making quiet, game-changing leaps. Let's start with the big one, the development that's rewriting the rules of global power: China's nuclear breakout. For decades, China had a minimum deterrence policy, basically holding just enough nukes to hit back if it got attacked. It was a defensive move. That has completely changed. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI, China is now expanding its nuclear arsenal faster than any other country. In just the last couple of years, its stockpile has grown dramatically, now estimated at around 600 warheads, and it's projected to have as many as the US or Russia by 2035. And it's not just about the numbers. China is building around 350 new silos for intercontinental ballistic missiles. This isn't a small mobile force anymore. This is a large, hardened force ready to launch on warning. It transforms China from a regional nuclear player into a true global peer. For the first time since the Cold War, the US has to worry about two nuclear equals. This gets even more dangerous because the New START Treaty, the last agreement limiting American and Russian nukes, is set to expire in 2026. Without it, and with China refusing to talk, the world could stumble into a three-way nuclear arms race with no rules, no transparency, and no limits for the first time in over 50 years. This is the secret that changes everything. China isn't just catching up. It's creating a new, much more unstable nuclear world. But the story doesn't end with the big three. The second quiet revolution is the rise of what you could call technocratic middle powers. High-end military tech used to be the exclusive playground of superpowers, but that's changing. Countries like Turkey and India are proving you don't need a trillion-dollar budget to build world-class disruptive weapons. Take Turkey. Its Bayraktar TB2 drones became famous in the early days of the war in Ukraine, proving that relatively cheap tech could wreck expensive conventional military gear. But that was just the start. Turkey is now developing advanced munitions and next-gen drones, allowing it to project power and run its foreign policy with an independence it just didn't have 20 years ago. Likewise, India is aggressively pushing its Make in India initiative to build its own military hardware. It's developing its own aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines, and a sophisticated missile defense system. India's goal is clear: become a dominant military and tech power in the Indian Ocean, free from relying on Russia or the West for its most critical defense needs. This trend is a huge deal. The rise of these tech-savvy middle powers makes the world far more complex and unpredictable. As advanced drone, missile, and cyber tech spreads, regional conflicts can become much deadlier, and more nations have the tools to challenge the old guard. This is no longer a two- or even three-horse race. It's a multipolar competition where a nation's cleverness can sometimes matter more than its raw economic power. Section 3, the technology frontline, who is winning? To really answer who's winning, we have to look past the budgets and into the labs. The new arms race will be won or lost not with steel but with silicon. It's a battle fought across invisible spectrums and at hypersonic speeds, in realms that were pure science fiction a generation ago. First up is the AI battlefield. Artificial intelligence isn't a buzzword anymore. It's being woven into almost every part of military operations. The Pentagon has said it wants to field thousands of AI-powered autonomous drones by 2026 with its Replicator initiative, a direct move to keep pace with China. We're talking about swarms of smart drones that can coordinate attacks without direct human orders and algorithms that can spot targets in seconds. China, meanwhile, is all in on what it calls intelligentized warfare, seeing AI as its best shot to leapfrog American military power. The US still has a broad tech lead, but the race to get military AI working on the battlefield is intense. Who's winning? The answer is disturbingly unclear because the true test of these systems will only happen in a real war. The second critical arena is the hypersonic sprint. Hypersonic missiles, which fly at over 5 times the speed of sound and can swerve unpredictably, are a revolution. They're designed to be unstoppable. Their speed and agility make them nearly impossible for current missile defenses to track and intercept. This technology threatens to make billion-dollar aircraft carriers and military bases incredibly vulnerable. And here, the United States is in a strange position, playing catch-up. Russia has already used hypersonic weapons in Ukraine, the first country ever to do so. China has run tests of hypersonic vehicles that have reportedly stunned Pentagon officials. While the US is now pouring billions into its own programs, this is one part of the arms race where it is not the undisputed leader. Finally, there are the invisible battlefields, space and cyberspace. Modern militaries depend completely on satellites for communication, GPS navigation, and spying. So, naturally, being able to disable or destroy an enemy's satellites is now a top priority. The US, Russia, and China are all testing anti-satellite weapons, from ground-based missiles to killer satellites that hunt others in orbit. A war that starts on Earth could quickly spread to space, with devastating results for the global systems we all depend on. At the same time, a constant low-level war is already happening in cyberspace, as state-sponsored hackers target critical infrastructure and probe military networks every single day. So, when we try to keep score, there's no single winner. The US still leads in spending and overall tech, especially in software and AI. China is winning on rate of change. It's closing the gap at an astonishing speed and has even pulled ahead in areas like shipbuilding and certain missile systems. Russia, despite its economic problems, is a disruptive innovator, focused on game-changing tech like hypersonics that are designed to sidestep American strengths. And rising regional powers are winning their own local arms races, giving them more influence than ever before. The era of a single military superpower is over. Section 4, the bottom line, what it means for your future. This multi-trillion-dollar global arms race can feel like an abstract game played by generals and politicians, but the consequences are very real, and they will shape your future in 3 major ways. First, there's the economic strain. That $2.7 trillion represents a massive opportunity cost. Every dollar spent on a new fighter jet is a dollar not spent on healthcare, education, or fighting climate change. For people in countries with soaring defense budgets, this means tax dollars being moved away from services that affect their daily lives. It can fuel inflation and forces a tough public debate. How much security is enough, and what are we willing to give up to get it? Second, and most importantly, this arms race is making the world more dangerous. The very technologies nations hope will give them an edge are actually making us less safe. Hypersonic missiles that promise a successful first strike, AI systems that could escalate a crisis on their own, and the collapse of arms control treaties all create a terrifyingly high risk of miscalculation. The old logic of mutually assured destruction, which kept the Cold War from turning hot, gets dangerously fuzzy in a world with 3 nuclear rivals and weapons that might make a surprise attack seem possible. A regional conflict, whether in the Taiwan Strait or on NATO's border, now has a much clearer and faster path to becoming a global catastrophe. Finally, the impact isn't just some future threat. It's happening right now. The spread of advanced weapons is the fuel for the nearly 60 wars currently burning around the globe. It makes them more lethal and harder to end. The impact is also felt in less obvious ways, like the constant threat of cyber attacks disrupting everything from your bank to your power grid, or the militarization of space, which threatens the GPS and communication networks our modern lives are built on. The shadow of this arms race is already falling across our world, whether we see it or not. The rules of this new era are being rewritten at incredible speed. From AI-piloted jets to the weaponization of space, the very meaning of war is changing. If you want to understand how these technologies are shaping our future, subscribe and tell us in the comments which topic we should break down next. AI warfare or the space arms race? Let us know what matters most to you. Conclusion. We are living through a massive shift. The world has moved from the peace dividend that followed the Cold War to a new era of intense, open, and global competition. The record-breaking military spending isn't a blip, it's the new normal. This race is being driven by a perfect storm of conflicts in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. It's being defined not just by the old superpowers, but by the rise of new tech players. And it's being accelerated by a revolution in military technology that is making the world more volatile and unpredictable. Trying to find a single winner in all of this misses the point. In this new arms race, every nation, in its search for security, is helping to build a more insecure world. And that leads to the most critical question of all. As we pour trillions into the machines of war, are we actually building a safer future or just speeding up the countdown to a conflict we won't be able to control?